In this video I'm going to be looking at the way in which the British Brainwashing Corporation, the BBC, is rewriting history, and in particular I'm going to look at a programme that I saw tonight which is about the 70s. But prior to that I would like you to think about the statement which was recently made by a Conservative MP called Nadine Dorries.
Are they still, in your opinion, two posh boys who don't know the price of milk?
Unfortunately, I think that not only are Cameron and Osborne two posh boys who don't know the price of milk, but they're two arrogant posh boys who show no remorse, no contrition, and no passion to want to understand the lives of others.
So the question is, are they two posh boys who don't know the price of milk? Well, I think the answer is definitely yes. And I've talked before about the fact that MPs don't buy their own food, so they can't possibly know the price of milk. So I think she's right about this. But I think there's much, much more to it than that. I don't think it's just a case of David Cameron and George Osborne being two posh boys who don't know the price of milk. I think they are apparatchiks who are working for an elite which has a very, very sinister agenda. And once you start to see that agenda, you will see it in many of the programmes that are being pushed out by the BBC, which is the organ of the establishment, which is brainwashing the people. And I'm going to try to show you this with this particular programme, which I saw 3/4 of tonight before the iPlayer that I was watching packed in. Now, as I've said before, when you're in the Matrix you can't really see this, but once you remove yourself, you start to see what the real agenda is. And what I've done here is I've tried to summarise what I think was the real agenda behind the programme that I watched tonight. So the real agenda was to make scapegoats of the baby boom generation who were young in the 70s, who are systematically now, as I've tried to show exhaustively in other videos, being blamed for the current crisis, in spite of the fact that they are actually the victims of the current crisis. So we're in a situation very similar really to the Jews in the last depression, and it really is quite sinister if you are awake and you can see this. The programme begins in this way. What were you doing in the 70s? Were you on a shopping spree? Worrying about the world? No, obviously not. Trying to save the planet? No, obviously not. You were being totally irresponsible. That's the idea, and that's what they're trying to get through to the young, so that they get the young to hate people who are pensioners. Trying to see in the dark? That's a little jibe at the fact that the lights went out in the 70s. Enjoying the sexual revolution, so you were having a wonderful time and the young people now are not having a wonderful time. That is the message that they are trying to get across, and they're doing it repeatedly, so people are being brainwashed. So the first item, were you on a shopping spree, is really disgusting. I am absolutely disgusted with the BBC. I mean, it's such a distortion. They talk about a few people borrowing some money on hire purchase to buy essentials, I may add, things like washing machines. That was what happened in the 70s. And, that is being compared with the credit card boom that we now see. Credit cards did come in the 70s, I believe, but, they weren't widely used to borrow money, certainly not. The real credit shopping spree began in the late 80s and 90s. It was not in the 70s, and that is a complete lie. I'm going to tell you what it was like in the 70s, because I lived through the 70s and I was young during the 70s in my first job. And what happened with me was I didn't spend any money. I didn't go on holiday, didn't spend a lot of money or anything like that. But just in my first job, I had difficulty making ends meet. I do know that inflation, and I did experience that, was 25% at one point, 20% for quite a while as well. So we had heavily rising prices. They do say that, to be fair, but then they talk about people borrowing money on the credit card, and that really didn't happen because you weren't allowed to go overdrawn. And I'm going to recount what happened to me. When I had my first job, and I didn't find it that easy to make ends meet, and I would go overdrawn just by a few pounds at the end of every month. And I received a letter from the bank manager very promptly saying, I can still remember the words he used. He said, you appear to be going overdrawn at the end of every month, by which you appear to anticipate your salary. And I was sent for and told not to do that again, and I had to stop doing it, and I had to learn to be a bit more responsible. But I wasn't, buying luxuries or anything like that. I want to make that clear. But that was what it was really like in the 70s. We weren't borrowing money right, left and centre at that time. That is just such a lie, such a distortion. BBC, you should be ashamed of yourself. If you're young and you really want to see what the 70s was like, you need to watch The Likely Lads, because I think The Likely Lads gives a very accurate impression of what it was like in the 70s. Here you can see Terry, who, as you can see, did not have a car. He was getting the bus at this point. Admittedly, he didn't have a job, but he has no car. And Terry, who is portrayed, I mean, that's part of the joke of the series, as a bit more aspirational than Terry. And Bob has a car, but it's a battered old second-hand car. That was normal in the 70s. And he is buying a house. It's a normal run-of-the-mill semi in a street in which Terry jokes that you'd have to have a number on the house because otherwise you'd never be able to find it again. So that's the sort of life people led. And they are in their 30s, well into their 30s when they buy the house, as you can see. And the last picture is of the living room at Audrey's house. Audrey is Terry's older sister, and she's that much older again. And you can see it's a very, very ordinary sort of environment, not what Dominic Sandbrook is describing. That's rubbish. And here's a tribute to Dominic Sandbrook. Whenever you see something like this in which a historian is being, praised and promoted in this way, you know that historian is giving out propaganda that suits the global elite. I've already documented the same sort of thing from Neil Ferguson in one of my other videos. Anyway, you can see that he is very much in favour. I looked him up on Wikipedia, and he was born in 1974, so he's 38 years old. And I don't normally like making comparisons and saying, one generation is worse off than the other, because I do happen to think that a lot of people in their 30s now are really suffering, and I think young people are having a very, very hard time. But I don't like hypocrisy at the same time. And this man is 38, and presumably this is looks like his home. And you can see that he's got a very luxury flat. So if you can contrast that with what you saw in The Likely Lads, you can see that he is a real hypocrite here, and he should not be saying the things he's saying. But when the BBC does a piece of brainwashing, it likes to get quite a lot of brainwashing in at the same time. And as you can see, the second point that I've made in the objectives that I think were behind this programme is that they were trying to promote the idea of the British Empire. I've documented in another video, Education for World Government, how Neil Ferguson has been used for that, and I've also noticed the programme by Jeremy Paxman about empire, and you'll see the word empire is being used at every opportunity in the media. Once you know this is happening, you start to see it, and you can see all the sort of flag waving that there was in the video. And also it said, at the beginning it said, the last fantasies of imperial greatness were finally blown away. Now, this is ridiculous. Anyone with the slightest knowledge of history will realise that the British Empire had started to disappear in the 50s, and the process was completed in the 60s and was pretty well non-existent by the 70s. So this statement that the last fantasies of the Great British Empire were finally blowing away is absolute poppycock. All of this is rubbish, really is. But you have to ask yourself the question, why are they promoting empire in this way? And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it could be that they're trying to soften us up for war in various countries while they go in to get the resources, and it could also be because they are softening us up for world government. The BBC really know how to play on people's emotions, so what they do is they introduce Idi Amin, and they show him commiserating with Heath at the height of the crisis and saying how sorry he is that Britain is suffering. He's being obviously very sarcastic, and he offers money to Britain, which of course British people would find really humiliating. So it would make them wish that they had the empire back. I actually think this is absolutely appalling brainwashing. And the other point that's being made in the programme is about the working class. The miners are portrayed here as greedy. I don't think that was the case, but that was certainly the propaganda that came out at the time in the 70s. And there's also a warning to the population that if you go on strike, as the miners did, the sort of thing that will happen to you will be the winter of discontent. You will have the lights out and all the rest of it. And I expected that they would be putting that out. But one thing that really did surprise me was the picture of the pit. And you can see a dirty, great, big chemtrail behind it. So, I mean, it's almost laughable. There are quite a few skies that are being shown, which are suggested to have been skies in the 70s, but they couldn't have been because you didn't have chemtrails in the sky like this in the 70s. That is something which is completely new. Started in the 90s, actually, the chemtrails, and they're taking the opportunity to take a modern-day picture of a coal pit and to suggest that this was a picture taken in the 70s and therefore that chemtrails did exist at that time. The amount of brainwashing in this programme and propaganda is unbelievable. And that's all I have to say, really. I think that people need to be aware. Once you're aware, you will start to see it everywhere.